Well, welcome to this live stream, and we have the pleasure to be joined by Phyllis Grant, who is a Head-Royce parent. She's a cook. She's a writer. She's a photographer. She's an all-around just rad person, and she's been kind enough to agree to help us out with this sort of quarantine version of a senior project. And she's been kind enough to make some videos and help sort of give the kids, a few seniors, an opportunity to learn how to make pastry dough and make a galette. And so now we're going to just have a short chat, and I have some questions for her about her life and about her new book that just came out, which is totally awesome. And this is a book that has it has a life of its own in my house. I can tell you that because Phyllis and my wife, Erin, are old friends and phone buddies. So, okay. So Phyllis, my first question is going to be unusual, but I think I'll circle around to why I'm asking it. And that is, are you willing to tell us a story of your bracelet?
My bracelet?
Yes.
So what I'm wearing right now?
Exactly.
You know, I don't know that there's a story for this bracelet. I do know that it was a belt. Is it a different bracelet that you're thinking about?
No. It's just that because of this format, like getting to know, I've been watching your videos and getting to know a person through this medium is so unusual. And the thing that is most, I guess, striking about watching your videos is that bracelet is always present. And so I figured that there had to be some sort of, it had to have some sort of role to play in your life or in your sort of. And I'll come around again to why I'm asking.
I love that. I love that question. And when I put it on, I feel more grounded and I feel strong and I feel like I can find my voice. I can't believe you actually figured that out. And it used to be I wore a different one, but my dog ate it. So I had another one that was made from a belt that I liked a lot more, but this is the replacement. But it's true. I don't do much else before I do these videos, but I do need to put a bracelet on and an apron.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. So why don't you tell us just how you came to food, like how food became such an enormously important part of your life?
It's just always been there. I mean, it's what I woke up for in the morning. I wanted to talk about lunch and breakfast, talk about dinner. Throughout the day, it was always about what's the next meal. I mean, one thing I always talked about is summer camp. I don't know about you guys if you went to sleepaway camp, but for me, it was all about what was going to be for dinner at camp or when we were going to go have waffles at Aunt Faith's. There were all these food traditions built into the camp that no one else seemed to care about. But for me, it was, okay, today is pancake day. Today is waffle day. So, and also in my house growing up, I would say that all the good stuff happened around the table. All the comfort, the nourishing, the discussions. It's just, I felt like once we all sat down, everything out there sort of went away and we were able to have a little bit of peace for a little while. So I've just always associated it with peace.
Nice.
A meal. Yeah, and I know you have a bit of that in your house as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, you grew up in a house that took, I guess, it took art and sort of like visual richness very seriously, and it also took language very seriously. And I guess I'm wondering if food became part of your way to access beauty and artistry. I wonder if that's sort of a part of your story of going from the life of being a dancer, which was so important to you when you were younger, to being a chef, a cook, somebody who's working in professional kitchens. I wonder if there's a through line there.
I would say the physicality of dance and cooking and writing actually have all felt very similar to me. So the writing I do is very physical. Obviously, dancing is all about movement through space, and cooking as well. It's very physical work, and I'm at my happiest when I have 10 things going on at once in the kitchen. And I would say I'm at my happiest with writing when I have 10 stories flying around and I'm just trying to get them down and pare them down. So it's more just how I move through the world, I would say. And I used to cook as a teenager. I would cook as a kind of a meditation. I would make chocolate chip cookies because, again, it was relaxing and it made everything else go away. So I think it's more that it's a meditation for me. It didn't become something beautiful until I started taking pictures of food. I didn't care about what it looked like until about 10 years ago. And Aaron and I certainly have spent a lot of time discussing over the years our, I don't know how one thing has led to the next. So how the blogging led to the photography led to the writing led to the recipe development. It's just this circular thing, and one thing builds on the next, and you just get better and better at each one as you do it. And we have spent the past 10 years doing these things over and over and over again. And I think the beauty has in some ways come out of that. And now I see my kids doing this. If they're making avocado toast or something like that, I notice them move it on the plate in a certain way, and they cut it in a certain way, and they drizzle the olive oil on it, and it's not precious. It's just that somehow the beauty of it has become just as important as the taste. And I don't think that growing up, that was the case.
I wonder if that might have something to do with the time too. The way when I was reading your book, I mean, I lived in New York City in the 90s. I moved there in 1989 and lived there in the 90s, but it was great to read about sort of the late 80s and 90s in New York City food.
Yeah.
And, the food in New York it seemed like about technique and about this sort of small number of ingredients. Whereas now food seems to be so ingredient fixated, the beauty of fresh, locally grown ingredients. And I wonder if that sort of zeitgeist is partly to why your relationship to food has taken on this dimension of beauty and visual, sensation.
Well, I think that it's more I think the comfort comes first, actually. So, and I find a lot of beauty in the mess as well, and I write about that. So it's not like I'm always trying to make everything look symmetrical and perfect. It's more the abundance is beautiful. It's sort of what you're saying. There are layers and levels of beauty, and it's not all visual. And it's true that in the 90s in restaurants, everything was tweezer food. It was perfectly stacked, and it was a precious little microgreen, and that's not comforting to me, at least anymore. At the time, I found it fascinating, and I loved being in that world and learning, but it didn't move me at all. But a pile of pesto pasta drizzled with garlic oil, splatted with homemade ricotta, to me, there's nothing more beautiful.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think that's helpful too for it. I'm imagining that we've got some students who are watching, and one of the things that I think cooking can be intimidating, right? Because there's all of this technique and there's all of these rules that you're supposedly have to abide by in order to make good food. And I noticed I've noticed over the years knowing you that you can abide by certain rules, like you were talking about it in your video on baking a galette. Like when you're baking, there are rules that there's ingredients you need to follow. You need to have the right ratios. It has to be correct. But on the other hand, you also want to break out of those rules and not worry over much about abiding by them.
Yeah.
And so I think to be a young person coming to food and just experimenting, right?
Yeah. And also noticing how you're most comfortable. Some people are more comfortable starting cooking with pastry because they need, and this is where I started. I mean, it's comforting, and I write about this in my book. I think I write something like, there's comfort in the logic of baking. So when I was 12, that was really helpful. But as I got older, I didn't find comfort in the logic. honestly, once I left at 18 for New York, I stopped being a rule follower, for better or for worse. I've never, ever done anything that I'm supposed to do, I've been told by friends and family. And yeah, now I start with what's in my fridge, and I start with what I'm craving, and then I might work my way back in the other direction towards technique. But it's taken a lot of time. It's taken 17 years of cooking 3 meals a day, and you know what this is like.
Right.
And it's the 10,000 hours. It's that's how I've learned to cook. I didn't learn to cook in restaurants in the 90s at all. I learned how a restaurant worked. I learned the hierarchy. I learned how to play the game. And I learned how to survive until I couldn't survive anymore. And the one thing I didn't lose, I lost the desire to work in restaurants, but I didn't lose my love of food and thinking about it all the time. I was telling a book group last night, actually a Head-Royce book group. I joined them last night, the 11th grade book group, bunch of wonderful women. And I told them that in the middle of the night when I wake up, I make salads in my head. So you asked me when the food thing started. It's just always been there. I'm always making salads in my head.
Right.
So, yeah. Anyway.
Now, reading your description of working in restaurants in New York City in the 90s is, I'm very fussy, so it's incredibly terrifying. Like the idea that that would be a way to deepen your love for food seems, antithetical. Like working in restaurants. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to work in a restaurant?
Well, it's a lot of hours on your feet for one, about 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. So your day off doesn't even feel like a day off. I used to cry. I would sleep, wake up, cry, and then think, oh my God, I have to go back tomorrow. And then my heart would start to race. So it's not a balanced lifestyle, or it wasn't back then. Things have changed. They have changed, even in New York. They have changed. The hours are not quite as crazy. There's an awareness, certainly post Me Too, in terms of sexual harassment in the kitchen. Right. There's a lot less. It's still going on, but there's an awareness, which is good. So yeah, being a young woman in a kitchen, that was not fun. At the same time, I was given an opportunity to move over to Garde Manger and learn how to make salads and learn how to cook yellowtail and do all that, just by saying, hey, would you mind if I moved over there? Like, sure, come on over. So it was a time when you could move around the kitchen pretty easily. I was willing to work for very little money, so and at times for no money. So I working for free in the 90s in restaurants was a possibility. You could knock on a back door of a kitchen and they'll welcome you in and have you peel 1,000 carrots. I don't think you can do that anymore either. So it was physically really taxing, emotionally taxing, and it's kind of soul crushing, frankly. Yeah.
Well, it sounded like, particularly the misogyny that you had to deal with, that sounded like a very difficult. It's difficult for one's confidence, right? Like you must have asked the question of, what's my worth in this space, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But I was too tired to ask myself such an intelligent question.
Right.
What's my worth over here in Garde Manger? I was basically like covering my body and hovering in the corner, and the dupes would come in. I'd have 40 dupes lined up. If you guys don't know about dupes, they're duplicates, so it's of the order that comes in. And I was drowning. I was drowning most of the time, and I luckily had a few friends who came over and helped save me. But eventually I burned out and I quit.
Yeah. And can you describe for, let's say, a young person who likes to write, what was the process that you've sort of developed over time in order to have this really remarkable and distinctive voice that comes across when in your writing?
Oh, thank you. Well, someone gave me advice about 10 years ago about moving my fingers, just never stop moving my fingers. And that has helped me tremendously. So if you're writing an email, a tweet, a shopping list, whatever you're doing, you're writing. And every time you write, you get better, because writing is rewriting, is rethinking, is redefining. And a lot of what's in this book, well, a lot of stories, milestones in my life that I've written and rewritten for decades, like my daughter's birth, my son's birth, working in the restaurants. It was therapeutic. So I think the therapy of writing these stories to my friends helped develop a spare, specific voice, partly because I retold these stories. And I think as a writing exercise, take an important moment in your life, write that story, and then write it 100 more times, or rewrite it. So that the act of that, or put it in the second person. I mean, I never stopped playing. I guess like this morning, I started writing a friend an email, and I've been struggling with writing over the past 2 months. I've been very sort of weepy and emotional, and I've been writing a few things. I wrote something for Esquire, and it was just this weepy stream of consciousness thing. They were very lovely, and they published it, but I was like a little sketchy. But this week, I feel like I have found my voice again in some ways. And I realized that I was writing a friend an email about how I was feeling, like on a cellular level. Again, for me, it's back to the physical, how I feel changed by the past few months. Like I really, it's not just emotional. There's something I feel like that has completely changed in my body. And I think we're all feeling just like a seismic shift. And I started writing about that. And I was about to send it to my friend. And I thought, no, I'm going to hold on to that. So cut it, pasted it over here. I was like, that's the beginning of the piece that I need to write for this magazine next week. So it's sort of a fascinating process. Yeah. Often it comes from a personal, I often start from the personal to get to the more general.
Right. Yeah. So that's probably good advice, right? If you try to write in a sense, it's a little bit like writing an essay, where if you write your thesis first, your big thought, if you write that down first, then you're going to be always trying to force the issue from there on forward, as opposed to just writing down the things you know.
Right. But on the other hand, just to play devil's advocate, I think my husband, who's a filmmaker, he's the opposite. Mm-hmm. So I start by free writing and writing these emotional, physical, crazy things. And then he has to start with a structure that's completely outlined before he can even start writing a screenplay. So again, it's like cooking. It's the same thing. It's where do you start? And going back to what I said before, I don't know if I finished that thought, but this idea of figuring out where you're most comfortable, whether in your kitchen, whether it's following the rules and then playing later, or starting with play. I mean, it's okay to just throw things into a bowl, Put some flour and sugar and salt in there, add some eggs, add some dairy, and you've got a pancake. You really do.
Right.
It might suck the first time, but it sometimes sucks when you make a recipe that you follow religiously. Sometimes that sucks too. So find your comfort level. Yeah.
Can you talk about a term that I hear a lot with people who do recipe development, and who, in a sense, who can open up a fridge and look inside and pull out a meal, this idea of flavor profiles? Like, what does that mean? And if I'm looking at a bunch of random ingredients and I'm thinking, well, I need to put these together in some way, is there something that I can use, a sort of idea that I can use in my head that would help me to create something that wasn't going to be too buttery or too all of one thing, or something, that had some sort of balance?
Yeah, well, that's the word I was going to say. It's balance. And I guess a salad dressing would be a good way to, I like to use an example of salad dressing, because there is like the classic proportion, which I believe is, I think in Berkeley in the 70s, it was 2-to-1 when my mom's kitchen, and then it was 3-to-1. And now so 3 parts oil, 1 part acid. I've cranked it up. Partly it's my mouth. We crave more acid sometimes when we get older, I've heard. Partly because we lose our taste buds. But but thinking about that balance of how much acid, how much fat, how much salt, how much sweet, how much umami, whether it's fish sauce, anchovies, mushrooms, something like that. So if you can start with those fundamental things with everything you're cooking, and also taste, just you got to taste as you go along. Absolutely. Because every day is different. Your mouth is different. The lemon is different. The olive oil, sometimes it's more herbaceous or bitter, but starting, also it's fun, I think, to pull a bunch of things out of the pantry and do especially with kids, do sort of a taste test of, let's taste these 5 mustards. Let's taste these 5 oils, these 5 vinegars. And that's a great way to start putting together a salad dressing. Have a jar there, have some honey, have some sugar, and then you can start finding a balance and trusting yourself a little bit, trusting your taste, trusting your sense of smell. It's a lot about senses too. So it's the balance of what goes in, and it's the balance of how your mouth feels, how your belly feels.
Yeah. I like that idea too, that it's okay to check in on how you are that day. Like you might on a different day, you might pull out the exact same things and make something totally different because you're feeling down or you're feeling stoked, because it's the last day of the school year or something like that, right?
Exactly. I was thinking about this last night. I had this book event, and then everyone had eaten dinner. So I was on my own, and I thought, I want something big and bold and flavorful. So I made a hamburger stuffed with blue cheese, topped with cheddar, caramelized onions, purple slaw. And then my husband, he's never purchased these for me in 30 years we've known each other, but he knows I've been having a hard time. So he bought me hot Doritos. So so listening to your body, last night I wanted the fat. I wanted all that cheese. I wanted the acid in the slaw. I wanted the heat in the Doritos. Yeah. Did you think I would talk about Doritos? My favorite food.
Your favorite food? No kidding. Wow. You heard it here first, people. That's a scoop. Phyllis Grant, Dorito lover.
Yeah. I keep them out of the house. I have them twice a year. Otherwise, I would eat them all the time.
That's not bad. Yeah. I'm not sure what's inside of those. You probably want to be
worried. I read yesterday. You don't want to know. It's a lot of different colors. Like, why do you need blue in the Dorito?
Just in case. Just in case. I wanted to spend a little bit of time with the recipe, just for those intrepid seniors who have done this galette. But by doing that, I wanted to you talk to your tart dough.
Yeah.
Why do you explain? And what sort of things do you say to your tart dough?
I tell my tart dough how beautiful it is. I think some people talk to their plants. So
I talk to my plants.
Yeah, I had a feeling. I didn't want to accuse you of that, but
absolutely. I welcome every new plant into my garden, of course. Yeah. And
I walk down every morning into my kitchen and I tell it I love it. And then actually, let's see. Why do I talk to it? One thing I miss so much right now is shopping at the grocery store in a leisurely way. Mm-hmm. And partly how I figure out what I'm going to cook is by talking to myself and sort of to what I see. Mm-hmm. Like, wow, look at that onion, or, so I think it's similar. It's just sort of, it helps me sort of collect my thoughts and figure out what I'm going to make. And then with the cooking, it's just, I confirm that, that's just the right amount of butter. I think I need a little bit more. I think you're looking a little dry. I mean, it's narrating the experience. It's sort of like when you have a little baby, and often you walk around with them and you narrate the world.
Right.
I think it's just how I keep myself on track in some ways. And tart dough is so beautiful when you've done it correctly and you see the chunks of butter in it. So I like to acknowledge, like, wow, damn, I did it, because it's not hard, but things can go wrong. If it's a hot day, if you get distracted, or if you over mix it, you're not going to see those chunks, and then it won't be flaky.
Right. No, I thought it was a really smart habit to have, actually, to communicate with your work, in a sense, right? It's like, this is my task at the moment, so I'm going to have a genuine relationship with my task. I'm not doing something else in my head, and distractedly making my galette dough. I'm making my galette dough. So
I like that. It sort of, keeps you in it.
Yeah. It's attentive. Yeah. Can you, because I have made dough many times and almost never successfully. Like I almost always have problems when I make dough. So can you, I guess, what would be the, 2 or 3 key pointers that you might give for a newbie who wants to make, some good dough?
Some good dough. Well, definitely eliminate distractions. I wouldn't listen to NPR or the radio while you're making your first batch of tart dough. Unless that helps you focus. It doesn't help me focus. Very cold butter helps, although in the video I show it with frozen butter, which is even more work. But in some ways, I said in the video, maybe the first time around, avoid using frozen butter, but there's more sort of safety in using frozen butter that's been cubed because it doesn't warm up so quickly, and you have the time to really, again, to feel and to see what's going on. Mm-hmm. And most tart recipes gives very specific instructions in terms of how large you want the butter chunks to be. So in my recipe, I separate the butter in half. In the first half, you use your fingers, constantly snapping them and moving the butter through the flour and salt mixture until it resembles cornmeal, coarse cornmeal. And then you put the second batch of butter in, and if it's a hot day, make sure you put it in the freezer or the fridge to keep it chilled. Put the second batch of butter in, and then you move your fingers, snapping, integrating it until it's the size of peas or corn kernels or something like that. I wouldn't use a Cuisinart for the first few times you make tart dough, just because I've made it thousands of times and I find that I often over mix it. You can't really see what's going on in a food processor. Yeah. And then in terms of the, just once you've incorporated the butter, there's very little touching that needs to happen. And I show this agitating of the bowl. So you want to add a little ice water just to bring it together, and you're not massaging and kneading and you're just lightly moistening what's in the bowl. Right. And then dump it out on the counter and just stop touching it. Basically, you don't need to touch it nearly as much as you think you need to touch it. I think we all associate dough with kneading, and with tart dough it's different because you're trying to bring that butter in a way that creates layers of flakiness, and that's why you have the 2 different size chunks of butter. And then just touch it less than you think, and add less water than you think you need to.
Right. Yeah. When I watched your video, I was certain that it wouldn't work. Right. I mean, you added so little water that it looked still so incomplete. And sort of dry, I don't know what the word is, but almost sandy. Like it wasn't gonna hold, but then you wrapped it up with
and with the Serrano. And part of what you do then is you let it rest, and the water that you have put in starts to move its way through. It's like the gluten soft settles and the water spreads, so you're moving towards tender dough and flaky dough. So just trusting that a certain amount of the work is just going to happen from that rest.
Right.
That's another thing I would say.
Yeah. That was, it was incredible. I mean, really watching that was like, so this is why I've never managed to make good pastry dough.
I can't believe you watched the whole thing. I actually was sort of horrible. I was like, this is 17 minutes. More than 17 minutes, but that's real time. I mean, that's the thing. You have to also find a certain meditation in it. You can't be in a hurry.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that right there is pretty good advice for all of us who want to spend more time in the kitchen, is that you have to, at some points, you're going to have to be patient with your taste buds and with you're experimenting and with your own self, right? You're going to just have to be patient with your learning and you're doing. Like if you try to rush it, it's not going to be necessarily a very pleasant experience too.
No, and eventually you can rush it. I mean, I can bust out some tart dough pretty quickly now, and and I pretty much everything I cook, if I need to, I can do it fast. But I had to do it slowly, hundreds of times first.
Right.
to establish. Yeah. But there are shortcuts you learn, and yeah, it does take a long time.
If you were on a desert island and you could only really eat, one galette a day, would it be sweet or savory?
Savory, yeah. It would be a caramelized onion and potato, maybe with a layer of goat cheese on the bottom, topped with an arugula salad. That's my dream meal right there. Yeah.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah. How about you? What's what would you eat on the desert island?
It would definitely be a savory. Yeah. I'm addicted to sugar, but savory, like I like eggs. I would probably, if I had to pick one thing to eat, it would probably be an omelet with herbs and just a little Parmesan, herbs and Parmesan, and maybe some avocado on there, and arugula salad on top when it's done.
Always arugula salad on top.
Absolutely.
We have tried to make omelets in this house, and we have failed. Tell me your omelet trick or advice.
So Aaron taught me how to make an omelet, and I'm not exactly sure what the trick is, except that we have an omelet pan, right? And I'm right here. Here it is.
That's so convenient. And there it is.
The omelet pan. It's cast iron, right? Cast iron pans. I mean, I love cast iron pans. My mom, who is 82 years old, has 2 of her grandmother's cast iron pans. And those are the things that when my parents pass, that my brother and sister and I are going to fight over, are those cast iron pans, because there are 3 of us and there are only 2 pans. But the pan is key. We only use this to make omelets. It's got to be nice and hot. Those are the only tips that I really have. We a very hot pan, put a little butter in, and then when we make it, it's going to be hard to describe, but when we make it, you fill up the pan with your omelet, and then you just pull it. I use one of these guys. You pull it from the sides like this, and it creates these sort of wrinkles. And then the wet egg, I guess the runny egg, runs onto the exposed pan, the hot pan, and then you do that a couple of times, and then that's it. So we cook a fast omelet, and I like a pretty runny omelet at the end. Like the outside is nice and cooked, but the mixture of herbs and Parmesan and, maybe leftover chicken or whatever is in the fridge is pretty gooey. So some people have a hard time with that, but I don't.
No, I like it that way. It's like at Betty's Ocean View Diner. I remember they always asked, if you want it, what is it, soft, medium, whatever. And soft. Right. Soft would scare some people for sure.
Yeah, it does. I know, but it's funny. I refused to eat eggs like that when I was a kid, up until actually I married Aaron. Then I learned the truth, which is that those eggs that way taste delicious.
Yeah.
And dry, when they get hard, they get dried out. So
that's true.
Yeah. There is actually a video of Julia Child making an omelet on the internet. And it's fantastic. And the whole thing takes like 10 seconds. Like she cooks it so fast. The pan must have been insanely hot. It's very thin, but it's all wrinkly and kind of mobbed up, and it's awesome.
Well, there's one, I've been obsessed because we really have made the worst omelets, but I watched a video of Julia Child and Jacques Pepin, sort of like, they had that cookbook where they
where they
their own version. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you gotta watch that one. It's good.
Well, obviously, when this quarantine ends, we're gonna have
omelet party.
We're having your family over for an omelet party. Yeah.
Right. Oh, I look forward to that.
Well, I want to make sure. I'm just going to look at this document that has the questions that people sent in. I want to make sure that we ask. Food you home for 4 days. Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. That's a good one. One ninth grader asks Anae, who is actually Anae went to step 1.
Oh,
yeah.
My favorite.
Yeah.
School. Yeah.
Preschool where our kids went.
Yeah.
He asked, what's a memorable meal? Like, what's a super memorable meal for you?
Oh, that's hard because you know what happens? I see thousands. There's
Yeah,
it's like a wallpaper of meals.
I totally agree.
But I will say that the birthday meal growing up that my parents always made was flank steak that would marinate all afternoon. I can smell it. My mouth starts to water. So it was marinated with some sort of like sherry wine vinegar, red wine, shallots, maybe a little lemon juice, salt, pepper for the afternoon. And then my dad would grill it.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom would make risotto, but not the kind we make now. We didn't have arborio rice back in the day. Or what's the other one? I always get that wrong. Anyway, I hear it's better than arborio.
Okay.
Google it. So she would make just with plain white rice, basically a cheesy rice that we called risotto.
Oh, right.
And then a perfect, I don't use the word perfect very often, but it's sort of iconic in my mind, but butter lettuce salad that they grew the butter lettuce. And then my mom would make the two, I guess it was 3 parts oil, 1 part vinegar.
Nice.
Vinaigrette. And that's the meal. That's the ultimate meal. That sounds
pretty good.
Pretty good. And roast chicken. My parents, and I write about this in my book, actually. I roast chicken sometimes, but it's never as good as what my parents made. So I miss my parents. Haven't seen them much. We had a social distancing lunch the other day for my mom's birthday, and I actually gave her the galette, the apricot galette that I made.
Right.
Yeah.
With the burnt that incredible top that you did with the
torching.
Torch
yeah.
Top.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I posted these videos on Instagram. It's been cool because a lot of people have been making the tart throughout the world and sending me images. So that's been really fun to see. It's really beautiful. And some people have pulled out their blowtorches. So
that was cool.
It's so fun.
Yeah. Be careful, young people, if you're making food with blowtorches.
Well, it's a pretty small flame. I have to say, my son has been torching things in the kitchen since he was 3, and so far so good. Knock on wood. We always made a baked Alaska for his birthday. So layers of ice cream and then the meringue on the top, and then he would torch it.
Oh, baked Alaska is delicious.
I think we all need a baked Alaska in our lives right now. That would help.
That's a good thought. That would make things a little better.
Yeah, definitely. Someone had a question that I saw about sourdough.
Oh, right. Here, I can read it for you if you want.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Let me see. What is the secret to sourdough starter bread that leads to bread that is like the one served at Comey?
I love how specific that is.
Yeah.
And the answer is I have no clue, and I wish I could do that. But I do know I have a sourdough starter over there, and it's good. And I make waffles and English muffins and stuff like that. I don't bake bread, but tartine. If you Google tartine sourdough starter, that's a wonderful place to start. And so that's my advice for that. And just it's the sourdough starter is fun. It's like having a little pet.
Right.
Yeah. Especially right now, we're all home, so feed the pet easy. And don't, it doesn't have to be in. I mean, this person who asked the question obviously wants to make delicious bread, but you can use a sourdough starter in so many things, and including crackers. And you have to dump a certain amount of it every day of the discard, and you can use that discard to make things too. So the internet is overflowing with ideas for a sourdough starter right now.
Yeah, these days.
Yeah.
Well, okay. We're at 45 minutes, so I don't want to.
Oh wow, that was fast.
I know. It was really fast. Okay, we've answered that one. We actually have. There's a student. He's in your daughter's class. You know Aaron Finkelstein? No, he's an aspiring chef, and he just wondered if you worked with David Bouley, if to sort of describe the experience of working for somebody who has such an monumental sort of reputation in American cuisine.
Well, actually, if I can find, I can read one paragraph that might explain exactly how it felt. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Because I write about cooking with him, specifically him teaching me. Okay. Chef shifts his weight from side to side, mumbling to himself, furrowing his brow, components moving together as if he's gathering ideas from the air. He does this every service. I only know how to follow a recipe, but he is making shit up as he goes along, and I love watching. He whisks together creme fraiche, fromage blanc, sherry wine vinegar, chopped chives, almond oil, salt, pepper. Never stop tasting, Felicia. That's what he called me. He scoops some up with his finger to taste. I do the same. And then I wait for the next step. Sweat drips down the backs of my legs and into my boots. Do you have some blanched beans? Oui, chef. Fava, lime, romano, yellow wax, haricot vert. All of them, please. I follow his every move so that I can repeat the dish over and over again throughout the evening. The way he examines the beans, gently cradling them in his fingers before dropping each one down into the bowl. How he coats everything with the creamy, nutty mixture. By quickly shifting the bowl away from his body and yanking back, away and back, as if he's flipping a crap. I watch his hands, the path of his eyes, tossing, tasting, adjusting. This is when I breathe. This is when I learned. So that's really what it was like. I spent a lot of time when he came over into my space in Garde Manger. That's when he was teaching me. He didn't really do much talking. It was very physical and very much about, again, like what I talked about, his senses. There was a lot of tasting and adjusting, and he's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful. I know I said that I didn't learn anything working in kitchens, and that's not exactly true. I think I didn't learn specifics. I learned a sense of play and a sense, as we talked about, of sort of knowing the room, knowing what do you got, and just watching him just pull and bring it together I was just stunned, because all I'd done up until that point was, all right, 1 cup of this, 2 teaspoons of that. I mean, that's all I knew how to do. And he never, ever looked at a recipe. He just pulled it together.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. That's a talent.
For sure. Yeah.
Phyllis, it's been awesome talking to you. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Missed you.
Yeah.
Say hi to Aaron.
Yeah, I totally will. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us. It's
my pleasure.
It's a real gift. And I appreciate you taking the time to help the seniors too with this project.
Oh yeah, thank you. I loved it. And if anyone made a galette, I'd love them to let me know, report back, ask questions. I'm open to talking or emailing or yeah.
Okay, great.
Cool. All right.
Well, that's it. Thank you so much for thanks for the chat, and
thank you.
Thanks for watching out there in whatever the webs. Our streaming has stopped.
Okay.